Welcome to the Jet Fuel Podcast, a series of Concord conversations. In each episode, our lead pastor and a guest will sit down and dive a little deeper into what we learned as a church that week. These are honest, practical conversations to fuel your faith and help you live it out with purpose and consistency. Or, in other words, this is jet fuel for your soul.
All right. Well, welcome in again to Jet Fuel. These are our Concord conversations, and they have been incredible. We're week 6, and so I just want to thank all of you guys who've been watching and listening and supporting, and we're just enjoying so much as I talk to different staff members who've been on this, your comments and how it's encouraging you, it's giving you tools, and also comments on whether I wear a hat or not. So I appreciate that, but we are so glad to be here today. And so today, Eli, we are going to talk about one of the most awkward and what people would consider cringy things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about generosity and giving today.
The most fun conversation ever.
It is. But if you do think about it, when you think about Jesus' ministry, when you go to Scripture, literally, it's one of the top 3 things that he talks about. He talks about the kingdom of heaven, and literally money and material possessions is something that he talks about a ton in Scripture.
I remember you told us one time that if we were to talk about money from the pulpit as much as Jesus talked about money, we'd be talking about money like once every month.
That's right. Every 4th sermon would be on giving.
Wrong.
Isn't that crazy?
I mean, it makes sense.
I know. I get it. But so today we're going to talk about a couple of things, and just to help our people that are listening, we're going to go a couple of different roads. And the first one will be kind of breaking down what is tithing, what is offering, what is generosity, those just mindsets.
Defining terms,
define terms, because I know there's a lot of different viewpoints, a lot of different interpretations of Scripture, but we're going to get down to what some of those words mean. And then we're going to kind of look at the heart and maybe some maybe mistakes we've made, some kind of wins we've had, where we've seen God show up, and then give everybody a couple of tools to walk away with. So let's start out. Let's define some terms. So Eli, from a biblical perspective, what does the word tithe actually mean?
So tithe literally means a tenth.
Okay.
So we see all the way back in the Old Testament, part of the Levitical laws to bring a tithe into the house of the Lord. And it's not always monetary in the Old Testament. Sometimes it's grain, sometimes it's just random offerings, but it is going to the tabernacle to not only provide for the tabernacle itself, but also for the Levites to be able to live, make their
providing for the house and the ministers,
all that kind of thing, because that was their job, was to work at the tabernacle of the Lord. So,
well, I love that, because sometimes there's some confusion around, we hear tithing, and a lot of times we want to kind of make it just giving. We try to make those the same term, but tithe actually means tenth, and that was the acceptable bottom step for giving. Like, God gives 100%. He provides our energy to work, our opportunities and jobs, and no matter how much sweat equity we put into it, God is the one that allows us to be stewards. But a tithe is a tenth, and for the believer, that is the standard that we talk about when we talk about a tithe being a tenth.
Yes.
So talk to me about offering. Like, we hear sometimes maybe them coupled together. You hear somebody get up, it's the hosting time, it's in the music set, and we say, hey, it's time for your tithes and your offerings. Are those different terms?
They are. So like we talk about, a tithe in the Old Testament is lawful. Like, that is something that you are expected to bring no matter what. That is part of the law. If you are not bringing your tithe, it was disobedience. Offering is that step beyond that, the overflowing generosity of tithe plus extra.
Okay.
And so we see that all over the New Testament as well, of the bringing the excess.
Yeah, the offering, the over and above. That's usually how I describe it. Tithe is that tenth, and then on top of that, over and above, is the offerings. When people would come. Do you remember this? Did y'all grow up in a church like this where a missionary would come in and you would gather a love offering, right?
Yeah.
I mean, some of y'all know what the love offering is. Somebody comes in and it's the extra that we give.
Or like the Lottie Moon, Annie Armstrong, Christmas and Easter offerings.
Extras.
The extras,
those are great. Well, let me ask you a question, just very personally. Where did you learn about giving to the church? Like, where was it that you began to develop your worldview as a believer on giving?
So it's been developing for the last, I'm 25 now.
You're so old.
I know, right?
That's incredible.
Mid-20s. About the last 20-ish years.
Right.
So I remember very vividly, Mom and Dad would we'd pull up to church and they'd give me and my brother a little bit of money to give to offering for big church.
It was a big deal for kids to put something in the plate, right?
It was super fun. But like it already instilled in me the fact of, okay, this is something that we just do. Like we give money to the church. We give our tithe. I mean, I didn't know that was what it's called, but I knew that we gave money to the church every single week. And as I got older and developed, I figured out, okay, this is why we actually give money to the church. This is what the money that we give to the church actually does. Whenever I actually started paying attention in business meetings and not just coloring in a spare notebook that my mom had in her purse.
Right. And so as a kid, it was a part of the worship experience, and you saw your parents doing this. And so they kind of passed that down as part of what a worship service looks like is we get to give. Yeah. That's big. I remember for me, Eli, something very, very similar, but there was a time in my family, I'm the youngest in my family, where my dad lost his job and he had to go back and, took a pay cut, and we were doing all kinds of things to survive just our standard of living, that, middle-class life. And I remember my dad writing the tithe check. And he said something to me that just changed the way I learned about giving. He literally, you're like, hey, we may not have enough for rent. Why are you giving a tithe? And he literally said, God gets his first. Yeah. And I just remember the faith of my dad going, hey, if we don't have enough for food, if we don't have enough for rent, God gets his, and the sacrifice and trust. I mean, just as a kid, I carry that with me in my much more birthdays than you have at 25. But that's a big deal. But you talked about something just a second ago. You said you learned the why we give. Why is it that we as Christians should give? And why is it that you personally have made a decision to be obedient and sacrificial? Because I know it's not always easy to give. Why do you give as a believer? Well, there's several reasons. One, like we talked about earlier, that the Lord is the one that gives, right? We own nothing on this earth. I remember there's a quote that I saw where somebody said, it was an old pastor who said, the Lord could leave me dead in a ditch and done no wrong to me. Wow. And so the benefits that we have of our life, the jobs that we have, the ability to have an income is all a gift. And so giving reminds our heart of that, hey, everything that I have comes from the Lord. As well as another thing that I've discovered recently is it lessens my heart's tie to my money, right? Because the one thing that we love to do, and we don't want to call it this, is idolize our money. And I'm really bad at this as well. Flesh that out a little bit. Yeah, the thing is, what is an idol? It's anything that you put above the Lord, anything that you put to save you, right? And in our day and age, especially, being my wife and I newly married, money sometimes is it's a little tight starting out. But we realize that anytime that we tithed, we never lacked. But anytime that we forgot to tithe, which we can talk about later, there's always what are we going to do? Right. But the Lord has shown and provided so much grace in that and so much provision through that. Well, that's interesting that you say that, because you talk about when we give, you've never lacked. But sometimes when we don't give, the tension that we feel, the anxiety that we feel maybe intensifies a little bit for you. Let me ask you this. When we talk about giving, sometimes it's the discipline of giving. We are disciplined to give the tithe. We're disciplined to give offerings or help support people on their mission trips or give to a charitable organization to help with our money. But sometimes it's a matter of our heart. The passage we talked about this week was being a cheerful giver. And, when we look at that passage, it starts out with that farming illustration of, if you sow sparingly, you'll reap sparingly, but if you sow much, you'll reap much. And for many people, they interpret that really close to the line of prosperity gospel and health and wealth. Yeah, so help us debunk that idea of going, hey, listen, when we give, it's not about getting and receiving. When we give, it's about our heart being in tune to God. So help us think through, how do we stay away from the tricky pull of, if I give, God's going to provide over and above, like I'm investing and I'm receiving interest from God. How do we stay away from something like that? That's just, not always the case. If God's going to provide extra if you give.
Yeah.
Extra money.
I think part of the misunderstanding comes in the idea of we think that God's provision looks like money, but oftentimes what God is giving us because of our gift is that heart for Him. It is that heart for the people that we are in and around, the people that we're in community with, the heart for our local body. And so oftentimes when we talk about, if you sow sparingly, you reap sparingly, if you don't really give that much, your heart's not going to be changed. But if you give a lot, and if you give the disciplinely, your heart will change.
So it's not about the impact of the amount. I think about Jesus in the temple with the widow's mite, right?
Yes.
All these guys come in clanging coins everywhere and
dropping
the big
money
show.
bags.
Yeah, big deal. And then the widow came up very discreetly and gave all that she had. And he was like, she gave most because
more.
It was everything. It wasn't just out of the excess, it was everything. I think it was you that directed me to a Tozer quote.
Yes, this thing stomped on my toes so hard. Do you have it written down?
I have it written down here.
Read it for us.
This is a big deal. A.W.
It.
Tozer literally said this. He said, before God will accept your offering, He must first have your heart. Without that, your gifts are bribes and not worship.
Mic drop.
That's intense. I mean, that's a mic drop moment because it has to change our paradigm. So let's talk about our church specifically. So when we think about Concord, because most of the people listening today are Concord folks, how does it affect our church in the positive and in the negative when our body participates in disciplined, regular, sacrificial giving, when they're generous? What does that do for the ministry that God has entrusted to us as Concord in the positive and the negative?
It's evident when, people are giving of how much the Lord moves through their gifts, whether they know it or not. Because it kind of goes into a big budget and then kind of gets filtered into a bunch of different places. But the coolest things I've been able to witness is people who literally are going to go without. And because of the generous gifts of our population, are able to, live just beyond the margin because of those special gifts. As well as, I serve in college ministry, and getting to see college students just receive the generous gifts, because it's a mission. College students are broke. They don't necessarily give. It's not like we are investing in college students because they are a multi-million-dollar program that's going to give us all the efforts in the world. But I can name at least 15 students who spent their entire summer overseas because of the generous gifts of not only this population, but also other populations as well.
Yeah, so it really invests in what our core values are and our very heart as a church, which is to proclaim the kingdom, which is definitely built out of the heart of the Great Commission that Jesus said, is that we're to make disciples. And so when we do that, we're investing in it. And so here's the thing that I've noticed sometimes too is if people at Concord just come to worship, they just come to a worship center experience. They come for music. They come for the prayer. They come for the teaching of God's word, maybe every other week or so. Maybe the window that they see of what Concord does gets very small, that they're not maybe seeing what's happening in the kids ministry or student ministry or our great adult community groups, our missions endeavors with our people and partners we support all over the country and the world. And so sometimes when we get out of our little area, we can see a little bit more of what goes into the ministry being furthered in that. Now, you talked about, us investing in college students specifically and generosity, allowing them to do things that they wouldn't be able to do on their own. They go on a mission trip. They wouldn't be able to pay for that. They're in school. They got school loans, all that kind of stuff. What are some of experiences that you've had with generosity that people have bless you? Because I think of a guy I used to know, and look, this dude, he had money, all right? And he was just one of those guys. And I know there's a reason that I don't have just stacks on stacks, because we've seen it ruin some people.
Yes.
But for this guy, he loved being generous. And he would do things like this. He would be like, hey, will you go find out how much their student debt is? Can you ask them what their car note is? And then I'd report, and he would just write a check for it and go, hey, go bless them with that. And it was the coolest thing just
Yeah.
to be the delivery boy to that. A guy that worked with us, his son got cancer, and right in the beginning of it, he just wrote this big check and goes, just take it to them to ease whatever financial deal that they have. And I know that this guy tithed, but this was some of his generosity that was making real differences in people's lives. What's maybe an experience you've had or you've seen of someone's generosity, their over and above offering, that's really made a spiritual impact in you and Lauren's life, or maybe in one of the college students that you've led over the last couple of years?
Yeah. There's so many stories. I'm having to filter through.
Did I catch you off guard? I didn't prepare you for this question.
A little bit, but it's fine. It's fine. There's been several times that generosity has just been super evident. But honestly, some of the most impactful ones that people tend to forget are the little ones. Just recently, my wife and I got invited to a 4th of July cookout, and after we were done, the host was like, "Take food home. Just take."
Nice.
And it's, which, it's not
the
like
young
we were
married
not
couples'
eat.
leftovers are a big deal.
Yeah, but it's not like we weren't going to not eat. But the fact that we got home from church and we're like, hey, we have leftover burgers. We don't have to cook, one, and two, it's free.
You
it's
got to cook
done.
in a microwave, right? You got to warm it up.
You got to nuke it, but that's a minute and 30 rather than me firing up the grill.
That's right.
But it's just the little moments of generosity that kind of stick with you, that really kind of build your paradigm. And because obviously those ginormous moments of generosity where someone just writes a check and cuts your debt in half or completely erases it. Those are few and far between, and those are amazing stories. But I think the most impactful things that people can do, especially in our congregation, is those just little moments of generosity. I think of last year when we packed grocery bags for college students.
Yeah, that was a big deal. That was something
Super
new for
cool.
us that,
Yeah.
well, at least we haven't done since I've been here. That might have been done before, but it was a new thing. And to watch college kids' face just to have
They
a
were loving
bag of groceries.
And I know specifically there was one of our college students who, he's former military, and his mom has had some health complications recently, and so he's having to take the load of caring for her.
Right.
And we were able to give him 7 grocery bags just because of the generosity of our people, which was super cool because he was just super thankful. And that's the generosity that I'm talking about. The little moments. We don't have to have $1 million bank accounts. We'd love to have that. And I'd love to have that as well, but I think God has not blessed me with a lot because I'm still trying to figure out how to be faithful with a little. But it's those small moments of generosity that really kind of add into people's lives.
That's big. That's big. Well, let's get real practical for our people today, because what I know, and we were talking with some of the guys that are behind the cameras and on the soundboards and stuff right now, but everybody has a different paradigm and a different experience with giving. And so there's a lot of people, when we do these podcasts on Bible study, and people are like, you just can't get around that truth. We talk about, making disciples. Yeah, we got to do that. You talk about giving and people are like, hit the brakes, right? Because their experience has maybe been diminished, or they've been hurt, or there's been some mistrust. But really, most all of giving comes down to our heart towards God, understanding He's the provider, we are the steward and the recipient of His gifts, that tithe is a starting point, that offering is over and above. But how do we help people take the next steps of wherever they are towards that heart of giving? Not health and wealth, not prosperity gospel, but trusting God and developing their heart to say, God, thank you. And here is my trust in you to continue the mission. What are some ways that people can take steps like that?
Yeah, giving is one of the hardest strongholds, I think, in order to instill in the believer, because like I said earlier, we're so tied to our money, especially when the economy is not what we want it to be, right?
And a gallon of milk's $6.
Yeah, and eggs are $4 a dozen, and you're just, great. It's wonderful. But it really comes down to that, do I trust God? We are very good at saying, we trust God to, provide for our marriage, to provide for our kids. But when we look at our bank account, we are not the most able to trust God with, hey, I don't know how we're going to make this rent payment.
Yeah. And so if I'm reading between the lines, we're saying step one is take a step of faith.
Yeah.
What we see in Malachi, I think it's the only place in Scripture where God says, test me.
Malachi 3:10.
Yeah. Like, I mean, this is the one thing that was written that you could test God on. And so I think that's powerful. We have a tool here called Financial Peace University. You've heard of this class, right? Have you and Lauren taken it yet?
We've not done it. The problem is, her schedule being at the hospital is absolutely crazy.
The healthcare industry.
It's Dave Ramsey.
Yes. Okay.
Well, Dave.
We are actually here at Concord going to start 2 different classes of this, one on a Sunday, one on a Wednesday. That's Financial Peace University. And so it is, I think, one of the greatest tools that a Christian can put in their life. But here's the stigma that comes with it, that anybody that signs up for a financial course it's like admitting to everybody. You feel like your face is going to be on a billboard.
So this person struggles with money.
Yeah, I don't have enough. I'm in debt. I don't tithe. And there's this negative stigma. But I would say for anyone who actually is that, you got credit card debt, you're upside down, you don't have the habit of giving, you're just all kinds of struggling, to the people who are doing really well. This is a tool that helps young people. This past semester, we saw 2 dads take their senior boys through it, going, boys, y'all are about to go to college. I want to show you how to manage your money. And we're talking young people, engaged, newly married, people that got kids, people that are empty nesters. I think that every believer ought to take some kind of financial course to learn how to best steward and step forward in generosity and disciplined giving so that they can make a bigger impact. And we've got that class starting in August, so just next month. What would you tell somebody who is afraid to sign up because they think people are going to think differently of them? Even if they're doing well, what would you encourage college students, young marrieds like you and Lauren, families like me and my Lauren and our kids? What would be your encouragement to people when a tool like FPU, Financial Peace University, is offered by Concord?
My first reaction for people who are worried about other people's opinions is to kind of just say, "So what?" Okay. I'm kind of on the side of I don't really care what people think about me. I do it in some sense, but
so you don't care what I think about you at all.
I care deeply what you think about me, Pastor Clint.
Okay, all right. Well, I was just making sure. I didn't.
But in terms of like, oh, that person's struggling. So what? We all are.
Yeah.
Like everybody's struggling with something.
Yeah. I just think it's a great way to sharpen the tools in your tool belt so we can be better instruments for Christ. And I'll tell you, Lauren and I took it early on. We made some bad financial decisions. We tried to flip a house like a year into marriage, and we had some credit card stuff. And I'm talking almost 20 years ago, and it was in a bad way. We took this course, and man, we did that debt snowball thing.
Yeah.
It's crazy how it works if you're just disciplined to do it.
What you think about it and you're like, okay, that sounds simple enough. But to actually see it put into practice, and then also, one, to have the accountability of a group of people behind you that's saying, hey, we're all in this together. We're doing this together. And actually going back to your thing about the small moments of generosity we were talking about just earlier, one of the couples in this last go around.
Yeah, you told me about this.
They actually are 2 of our college students. Actually just got married last weekend. They took the course together as they were walking through the engagement and wedding preparation. And one of the
their adopted
families paid for them to go through the course.
Dude, that's awesome.
Just because they're like, hey, we want you guys to be in the right spot.
So the Concord adopted family of the college students paid for them in their engagement to go through this class. Yeah. I mean, they are investing in generations of that family tree of giving,
which is super cool. And I would say to anybody who's watching and you want to do FPU and you're like, I don't know how we're going to swing that kind of money. There are people here at Concord that would 100%. Love to sponsor you. I know there's so many people that have actually gone through this, and that's part of it. They sow a seed for someone else, to saying, hey, we're willing to put down money for someone else to go through this.
Yeah, that's awesome. And there's several ways to give at Concord. We've got, you can text, you can give through the app, the bucket, we pass it every week. Yep. That's a great way. But Man, I am so thankful that you, as a young guy, are walking through this. I'm sure it's not always been easy. You've not always made, the correct decision every moment, but it's a journey for you and your wife together to go, as the Lord leads, we want to be obedient even when it's hard. And so I want to thank you guys for listening, because I think this is something that we want to walk beside you on. And just having this conversation has just been jet fuel for me. I hope it's been jet fuel for you. And we hope you tune in next week as well. Thanks, Eli.